Andor is one of the best received Star Wars shows to date, and already fans are looking forward to Season 2. Well, strap yourselves in, guys, because we've got a ton of updates about Season 2. Yahoo! And the creator himself has explained that post-credit scene, which is a bit depressing, but that's expected. We'll talk about that post-credit scene, and then we'll talk about the cool updates for Season 2 and the rumours and speculation that's floating around at the moment, because I think Season 2 of Andor is actually going to be even better than Rogue One. But first, we'll get into that post-credit scene, tie up Season 1 with a nice bow, and then we'll move forwards, because if you've been following along with all the Star Wars news of late like I have, then you'll probably know that surprisingly, there's been a lot of updates about the next season and what to expect already, and the fact it's already begun filming. But all this begins with that post-credit scene in Season 1, which shows the Death Star nearing the completion of its construction. And just looking at the scene on the surface, you may just take it as confirmation of what they were building on the Narkina 5 prison, and that's partly correct. And it would be absolutely normal for you to feel that sense of impending doom. I mean, assuming you've seen Rogue One, so you already know that Cassian doesn't survive past the film, neither does Saw Gerrera. And for all the new characters we've come to meet in Andor, well, we just don't know. We can assume they all die in Season 2, or perhaps not. Perhaps there's another route for some of them characters to take.
Where do you think you're going? Well, I'm not going that way.
And I'll come on to that in a moment, but first, let's look at what Andor creator Tony Gilroy intended that post-credit scene to represent. So looking at a recent interview he did, he references the appearance of the Death Star as a looming threat. But more than this, he also goes on to mention the fact that it does foreshadow the bitter ending that Cassian's journey draws to a close with. And if we dive even further still, the parts that were being built on Narkina 5 specifically create the dish, which is the actual part of the Death Star that blows Cassian up. So not only did he help create the machine that would go on to kill him, he actually helped create the specific part of the machine that caused his death. Gilroy goes on to say that Cassian never finds this out either. He knew he was working on something inside the prison that the Empire needed, and it's not until Rogue One that he learns about the existence of the Death Star, but he doesn't associate the two different things being connected, which is a pretty fair point considering he was in prison 5 years prior to all of this in Rogue One, and during that 5 years you can't imagine he has a lot of time to sit down and reflect on the past. He's working with Luthen now, maybe even up to the point of where Rogue One pretty much begins, and between Luthen and the wider Rebel Alliance, they'll have him doing a host of different missions, gathering intel on the Empire, which is what leads them to realise the Empire's building something, which a member of Saw Gerrera's group confirms to Cassian at the beginning of Rogue One, right before Cassian shoots him, if you remember that scene. Now, I know it is poetic in a way, and that is what Star Wars is meant to be. You might think it's pretty sad how Cassian helped build the very thing that kills him and so many others throughout the galaxy. Innocent civilians, fellow rebels, and even Jyn Erso, who he seemingly fell for in Rogue One. But you might find a bit of comfort in the idea that Cassian, alongside Kino Loy, actually delayed the Death Star significantly by escaping from the Narkina 5 prison, slowing down production of the Death Star parts, as we heard Melshi say in episode 11 that is going to spread the word as well, so people knew what was happening there.
Somebody's got to tell people what's happening down there. People have to know what's going on.
That might have further delayed if the news of Narkina 5 spread into other prisons somehow. I mean, you can't tell me there's no possibility of the odd guards here and there that are taking bribes from wealthy prisoners to send messages in and out, or maybe even to a crime syndicate who has a few members serving time inside and they've caught wind of what's actually going on, further delaying the completion of the Emperor's secret weapon. This is probably why it took 15 years to get to the stage of the post-credit scene, but another 5 years to just finish that little dish that almost looks like it just slots in like a piece of Lego, potentially saving you a few years worth of blown up planets. So the Death Star actually represents way more than just merely showing us what was being built on Narkina 5. It arguably foreshadows the darkest times that are yet to come, but also the positives, which are how long these final stages will actually take to complete, both of which I think we're going to see come to light in Andor Season 2, moving into Rogue One. And the good news is we already know a ton of what we can expect in Season 2. As Season 1 showed us the beginning of Cassian's journey, we can expect the next season to build on that story with more returning characters and stories that'll only enhance the story of the rebellion all the more. Brace yourselves, guys, because these Season 2 updates are wild and it might not go exactly how you think it will. We'll go through these updates and then we'll get into a bit of speculation about what we can expect for the next season, because I feel Andor Season 1 has already made Rogue One a better movie, and if Season 2 has a similar effect, they're in for a real treat. And Gilroy addressed the fact in a recent interview that as we know now the post-credit scenes of the Death Star, the construction of it isn't going to play a huge part in the next season, so that's not really going to be much of an ongoing thing. Rather, it's going to just be like a looming presence in the background, and of course, many of the characters won't know of his existence just yet. There are a few that do, such as maybe some members of the ISB, Director Krennic would, which I do actually think he'll appear in the next season. It would make total sense. Ultimately, Season 2 is going to be about who picks the final breadcrumbs, in Gilroy's words, to take us into Rogue One, which then leads to Episode 4, and how the rebellion will be formed. But he makes a big point about saying that all roads lead to Rogue One. Regardless of what's going to happen, it's all going to connect there. Which we all know has to be the case. This story and the story of Cassian has its ending already. But this is about how we got there, specifically how we get to that scene in Rogue One, where Cassian meets a member of Saw Gerrera's group called Tivik on the rings of Kefrin.
What kind of weapon? A planet killer!
Chasing down a rumour which is then confirmed to be the Death Star, the Empire's building a planet-killing weapon. He doesn't give any specifics away in terms of characters, such as Kino Loy making a comeback, only saying after the question is posed to him if Kino Loy died, that we didn't see him die. So that could leave him open to coming back in Season 2 as a possibility. But he does comment on the inclusion of K2SO in Season 2, saying that it's one of the responsibilities of the next season. If they're going to tie things into Rogue One, then K2SO needs to come into the mix at some point. The overall tone of the show, Gilroy tells us, will be the same, and he hopes the quality of the show will be up to the level of the first season as well, which actually may not be music to everyone's ears, funnily enough.
And I've been sitting around getting sick of your attitude!
You see, whilst a lot of people did enjoy Andor, there are some that didn't. And to hear the tone of the show is going to be the same, it might not be to everyone's cup of tea, but it certainly is mine. I do expect the urgency in the episodes to pick up somewhat, as between every 3 episodes in Season 2 there's going to be a 1-year time jump. You can't realistically think in an age of war, when things are really building up to this big event, which is A New Hope, things are going to necessarily be quite as chilled out as Season 1. Throwing in the fact that this season needs to see the real coming together of the Rebel Alliance and Yavin 4, with all these different groups merging, with all these different characters with different styles and different beliefs, there's bound to be serious attacks going down against the Empire and vice versa, whilst also seeing inner conflict within the rebellion. For example, with Saw Gerrera, as we know by the time Rogue One rolls around, he's no longer part of the main rebel group. In other words, there's a lot to be addressed in Season 2. You've also got to deal with some of the new characters that we don't see in Rogue One, such as Luthen, Brasso, Bix, Val, Cinta, and the rest of them. The list really goes on. We will need to see what happens to them ultimately, but there's bound to be some new characters as well that come into the next season. I think a lot of the characters I just mentioned will die in Season 2. However, this is kind of a little theory of mine. I think a while back it was reported that some of the new cast for Andor were told upon signing up that they could expect to go on to other Star Wars projects in the future, and I really don't think this would be masking them up or dressing them up as a stormtrooper to go and be in the background somewhere. But what I think this means is some of these characters will be taken into a different direction towards the end of Season 2, essentially writing them out of Rogue One so they don't have to be killed, but opening up the possibility for another series or even a movie featuring a rebel group with characters that we are already familiar with taking on another aspect of the Empire, which I'd be totally down for, to be honest. In terms of the characters that appear in Rogue One that we're yet to see in the Andor series, such as Krennic, Tarkin, Vader, Bail Organa, Princess Leia, they could all make an appearance as well. However, I don't think it would be necessary to include Vader in there myself. I think keeping him exclusively to Rogue One for this part of the story would keep his entrance in the movie all that more powerful. However, I think it would make absolute sense for the others to appear, especially Krennic, as he was in charge of the Death Star project, and there was actually rumours about him returning in the show. However, it turns out maybe it's just not in Season 1. With all this potential Season 2 has, the formation of the rebellion, returning characters, what happens with the characters both new and old, their stories and a few fights against the Empire, I think Andor Season 2 has the potential to actually be better than Rogue One, with the movie really serving as a cherry on top of the cake for what's turning out to be a fantastic story spread over 2 seasons and a movie. I'm interested to know in what you would like to see happen in Season 2. Let me know in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe. I'll catch you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.